May 29th, 1453, dawn breaks over Constantinople. The great walls that have stood for 1,000 years lie broken in places, scarred by 7 weeks of Ottoman artillery, but they still hold. Behind the Theodosian wall, Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos surveys his defences one final time. 8,000 men hold 21 kilometers of fortification against perhaps 80,000 Ottomans. The mathematics are accurate. Every defender must hold 26 meters of wall. Every gap in the line invites catastrophe. Every moment of inattention could court a disaster. The emperor does not yet know that his empire will end not from the thunderous cannons of Sultan Mehmed II, not from the waves of janissaries hurling themselves against the outer wall, not even from the grinding attrition that has consumed his forces for 54 days, but from a single door, a postern gate called the Kerkoporta, 40 meters of oak and iron, designed to allow Byzantine sorties against besiegers. A minor tactical feature in a fortification system that stretches from the Sea of Marmara to the Golden Horn. Someone forgot to lock it. By noon, the purple banner of Byzantium will be torn down from the Hagia Sophia. The last Roman emperor will be dead, his body lost among thousands of corpses scattered across the Peribolos. The city that called itself the New Rome, the heir to Augustus and Constantine the Great, will become Istanbul. The Byzantine Empire, which has endured barbarian invasions, Arab conquests, and crusader betrayals, will vanish from the map. But at dawn, Constantine XI still believes his walls will hold. This is the story of how the longest siege in Ottoman history ended in 30 minutes because of a gate left open. The Theodosian wall rises from the Golden Horn like a mountain of dressed stone, its triple barrier system designed by engineers who understood that Constantinople must never fall. Built during the reign of Emperor Theodosius II in the early 5th century, when Attila the Hun threatened the very existence of the Eastern Roman Empire, it stretches for 5.5 kilometers across the landward approach to the city. 3 distinct lines of fortification, each higher than the last, each designed to channel attackers into killing zones where Byzantine defenders can destroy them systematically. The outer wall stands 8 meters high, its crenellated top wide enough for 4 men to walk abreast. Behind it lies the Peribolos, a killing ground 40 meters wide, carefully graded to provide no cover for attackers who breach the first line. The inner wall rises 12 meters, its towers positioned to provide overlapping fields of fire across the entire approach. And finally, the Great Wall itself, 40 meters of limestone and brick rising from a foundation that extends 20 meters below ground level, its towers reaching skyward like stone fingers, each one a fortress within a fortress. Between these walls lie the Peribolos, zones of death designed with mathematical precision, every angle calculated to eliminate blind spots. Every distance measured to maximize the effectiveness of Byzantine archery and artillery. The engineers who built this system understood siege warfare as both art and science. They had studied the failures of other cities, analyzed the tactics of barbarian armies, calculated the physics of stone-throwing engines and the psychology of desperate men. Gates pierce the fortification at regular intervals, but even these openings represent defensive advantages rather than weaknesses. The Gate of Carisius, the Gate of the Adrianople, the Gate of St. Romanus, each one protected by a complex maze of walls and towers that force attackers to expose their flanks while channeling them into predetermined killing zones. To assault a major gate requires siege engines, coordination, and the willingness to accept massive casualties for uncertain gain. But scattered along the wall's length are smaller openings, postern gates, sally ports designed to allow defenders to strike at besiegers and withdraw quickly to safety. These gates serve essential tactical functions during siege warfare. They permit night raids against enemy positions. They allow supply lines to reach the city even when major gates fall under direct assault. They provide escape routes for messengers and reconnaissance teams. The Kerkoporta sits in the northern section of the land wall between the Gate of Carisius and the Gate of the Adrianople, where the great fortification curves toward its junction with the sea wall. Unlike the great gates, It opens directly through the inner wall without the maze of defensive passages that protect major entrances. In peacetime, citizens use it to reach gardens and cisterns beyond the wall, to tend vineyards and olive groves that supply the city's food. During siege, it serves as an exit point for night raids and as an emergency route for imperial messengers. The gate itself measures 3 meters wide and 4 meters high, built of oak timbers reinforced with iron bands. Its locking mechanism reflects centuries of modification and improvement: a main crossbar that slides into sockets carved into the stone jambs, secondary bars that provide redundant security, and a chain system that distributes the load across the entire gate structure. Above the gate, a small tower provides observation posts and defensive positions for archers. Below ground, the gate's foundation extends into bedrock, making it virtually impossible to undermine. By April 1453, this ancient fortress finds itself tested by forces that its builders could never have imagined. Sultan Mehmed II has ringed Constantinople with armies larger than the city's entire population. His artillery train includes guns cast by the Hungarian engineer Orbán, weapons that fire stone balls weighing over 600 kilograms. For 7 weeks, they have pounded specific sections of the wall near the Gate of St. Romanus, opening breaches that Byzantine defenders fill each night with rubble, timber, and earth. The siege has lasted longer than anyone expected. Ottoman planning assumed the city would fall within a month. Byzantine preparations assumed they could hold until Western relief arrived. Both calculations have proven wrong. The walls hold, but barely. Relief never comes. Instead, the siege has settled into a grinding routine of bombardment and repair, assault and counterattack, attrition and endurance. Emperor Constantine XI Palaiologos commands perhaps 8,000 men, though accurate counts have become impossible as casualties mount and stragglers desert. Half are Byzantine regulars, the remainder a mixture of Genoese volunteers under Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, Venetian sailors whose ships lie trapped in the Golden Horn, and foreign mercenaries drawn by promises of Byzantine gold that may no longer exist. Every man in the garrison knows the mathematics of the siege. They hold 21 kilometers of fortification with forces that would be considered inadequate for guarding a single kilometer under normal circumstances. The Ottomans need to break through at only one point. A single successful assault will open the entire defensive system to collapse. Constantine XI has divided his forces along the wall according to capability and tactical need. The Genoese hold the most vulnerable section near the breached walls, where Ottoman artillery has concentrated its fire. These men have experience in siege warfare, having fought in similar actions across the Mediterranean. Their commander, Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, has defended cities from Spain to Cyprus. He understands both the technical aspects of wall defense and the psychological pressures that break men's spirits during extended siege. Byzantine troops man the sea-facing walls and the northern sections where the land wall meets the Golden Horn. These positions face less immediate threat, but they guard against amphibious assault and provide security for the harbour chain that blocks Ottoman ships from entering the Golden Horn directly. The chain itself, a massive iron barrier stretched between towers on opposite shores, represents one of Constantinople's few remaining technological advantages. Foreign sailors and marines defend critical points throughout the city: the harbour fortifications, the arsenal, the granaries that hold what remains of the city's food supplies. These men fight not for empire or religion, but for survival. They know that surrender offers no guarantee of safety, that their best hope lies in making the city too expensive to take. The emperor himself takes position near the Gate of St. Romanus, the point where Ottoman artillery has focused its heaviest fire. From here, he can see across the Peribolos to where Mehmed II's massive pavilion stands, crimson silk marked with the Sultan's personal standard. Between emperor and sultan lie the bodies of 7 weeks of fighting, Byzantine and Ottoman corpses that have become landmarks in the contested ground. Constantine XI wears no crown, carries no scepter. The regalia of empire have been stored in the Hagia Sophia, awaiting either victory or the final catastrophe. Instead, the emperor dresses as a common soldier, his armor dented from previous fighting, his sword showing nicks from personal combat. He has chosen to die as a warrior rather than as a symbol, and his men respect this decision. On the night of May 28th, the Ottoman camp falls silent for the first time in 7 weeks. No more artillery bombardment shaking the walls every hour. No more probing attacks, testing Byzantine alertness. No more engineering work filling ditches and building assault platforms. The sudden quiet feels wrong, ominous. For 7 weeks, the sound of cannons has marked the passage of time like a deadly metronome. Now there is only the wind off the Bosphorus and the distant sound of prayers from both camps. Constantine XI walks the wall in darkness, checking positions, speaking quietly with his commanders. His route takes him along the entire landward fortification, from the Golden Horn to the Sea of Marmara. At each major position, he receives reports on ammunition supplies, casualty counts, and morale. The news is uniformly grim. Arrow stocks run low. Greek fire reserves near exhaustion, medical supplies depleted, food rationed to subsistence levels, but the walls still stand. At the Kerkoporta, the emperor finds a mixed guard of Byzantine soldiers and foreign volunteers. The position appears routine. 12 men in the tower, 6 more in the courtyard behind the gate, ammunition properly stocked, weapons maintained. The gate itself stands closed and barred, iron reinforcements added during the siege gleaming dully in the torchlight. A small tower above the gate provides clear sightlines along the wall and down into the city. The position appears secure, its defenders alert and ready. Constantine XI speaks briefly with the section commander, a veteran of campaigns in Anatolia and the Morea. The man reports no unusual Ottoman activity in his sector, no signs of particular enemy interest in the gate. Standard procedures are being followed. Watches change on schedule. The gate is checked every 2 hours and secured properly each time. The emperor nods and moves on. He has 67 other positions to inspect before dawn. The Kerkoporta represents one small segment of a vast defensive system, unremarkable in its routine efficiency. Constantine XI does not inspect the locks personally. He has no reason to doubt his subordinates' reports. In 7 weeks of siege, the gate has never failed to function properly. Its security has never been questioned. He walks into the darkness, continuing his inspection, unaware that he has just seen the point where his empire will die. Dawn on May 29th arrives with drums. Not the sporadic beating that has preceded previous Ottoman assaults, but a continuous rhythm that carries across the Horn and echoes off the walls of Constantinople. The sound builds gradually, regiment by regiment, until the entire Ottoman camp pulses with synchronized percussion. In the Byzantine positions, men wake to this sound and know immediately that the final assault has begun. In the Ottoman camp, Sultan Mehmed II addresses his commanders for the final time. The pavilion where this meeting occurs could house a small palace. Carpets from Persia cover the ground. Silver braziers burn frankincense and myrrh. Maps of Constantinople spread across tables made from rare woods, marked with positions and calculations and the accumulated intelligence of 7 weeks of observation. The Sultan himself, barely 21 years old but already a veteran of multiple campaigns, wears simple military dress rather than ceremonial robes. He has spent the night in prayer and final preparation, consulting with his engineers about breach points, with his artillery commanders about ammunition reserves, with his medical staff about casualty estimates. The man who will become known to history as Mehmed the Conqueror speaks to his officers with calm authority. The assault will come in 3 waves, each designed to accomplish specific tactical objectives. Irregulars and volunteers first. The Bashi bazooks, whose enthusiastic but undisciplined attack will exhaust the defenders and fill the ditches with bodies that later waves can use as stepping stones. These men fight for plunder and paradise, believing that death in jihad guarantees immediate entry to heaven. Their tactical value lies not in skill, but in numbers and willingness to die. Then the Anatolian regiments, disciplined provincial troops who will probe for weaknesses systematically. These soldiers represent the backbone of Ottoman military power, well-trained infantry with experience in siege warfare, equipped with standardized weapons and organized under professional officers. They will test every section of the Byzantine defenses, identifying points where the first wave has created opportunities for breakthrough. Finally, the Janissaries, the Sultan's elite infantry, who will exploit whatever cracks the first two waves create. These men represent the finest military force in the world, recruited as children from Christian families, converted to Islam, and trained for this moment. They carry the newest firearms, the most advanced siege equipment, and the absolute confidence that comes from never having been defeated in major combat. The plan requires no innovation. Mehmed II has studied the sieges of Baghdad, Damascus, and Belgrade. Constantinople's walls are stronger than any of these cities possessed, but the principle remains identical: continuous pressure until something breaks. Every fortress has a breaking point. Every defense has a weakness. Every garrison has limits to its endurance. But the Sultan also understands that victory requires more than tactical competence. His armies have been in the field for 3 months. Supply lines stretch back to Adrianople. Casualties from the siege have exceeded original estimates. His own commanders question the wisdom of continuing an assault that has already consumed enormous resources for uncertain gain. This attack must succeed. Political considerations demand it. Economic realities require it. Military reputation depends on it. Failure here will encourage resistance throughout the empire and invite rebellion in recently conquered territories. Success will open the path to Vienna, to Italy, to the heart of Christian Europe. At the Kerkoporta, the morning watch changes as it has for 7 weeks. Byzantine soldiers hand positions to their reliefs, check weapons, redistribute arrows from points of surplus to positions where Ottoman attacks have depleted reserves. The routine has become automatic, refined through repetition until each man knows his role without conscious thought. The gate remains sealed, its position marked on no Ottoman map of consequence. Among 68 breach points and gates along the Theodosian wall, it represents a minor tactical consideration. Ottoman reconnaissance has focused on the obvious targets, the main gates where assault offers clear strategic advantage, the breached sections where artillery has created opportunities for rapid penetration. But the changing of the guard follows no written protocol. Individual commanders have developed their own systems during the siege, adapting to casualties, fatigue, and the irregular nature of Ottoman attacks. Some sections maintain detailed rosters and formal inspections, with written orders specifying exact responsibilities for each soldier. Others rely on informal arrangements between soldiers who know each other and trust each other to remember essential duties. At the Kerkoporta, responsibility for gate security has evolved through custom rather than regulation. The same team of soldiers has handled this duty since the siege began. They learned the gate's mechanical peculiarities through daily use, developed shortcuts and double checks that ensured proper function. The system worked because it depended on experienced personnel who understood both the technical requirements and the tactical importance of their task. But sieges consume men. Casualties, disease, and desertion gradually erode the ranks of defenders. Experienced soldiers die or become too wounded to fight effectively. Their replacements lack both technical knowledge and institutional memory. The informal systems that work perfectly under stable conditions begin to break down as personnel change. At precisely 8 o'clock, Ottoman artillery resumes its bombardment after 12 hours of silence. The great guns focus again on the breaches near the Gate of St. Romanus, where rubble and timber from the night's repairs fly apart under 600-kilogram stone balls. The sound of impact carries across the city like thunder, shaking buildings and rattling windows miles from the point of impact. Smaller cannons rake the wall tops, forcing defenders to keep their heads down and their movements limited. This preliminary bombardment serves multiple purposes. It prevents Byzantine observation of Ottoman preparations, disrupts defensive coordination, and creates noise that masks the movement of assault troops into position. Under cover of this bombardment, the first wave begins its advance. Mehmed II has promised his irregulars the right to plunder whatever they can take during the first 3 days after the city's fall. Thousands of Bashi bazooks surge toward the wall, carrying ladders, grappling hooks, and makeshift bridges. They advance without formation or discipline, each man seeking individual glory and material reward. These troops do not expect to breach the defenses immediately. Their purpose is tactical rather than strategic: to tire the defenders, force them to expend arrows and Greek fire, and fill the defensive ditches with their own bodies. Ottoman military doctrine treats the first wave as expendable ammunition, valuable for its kinetic energy rather than its tactical skill. Constantine XI watches from his position near the main breach. The irregulars attack with more enthusiasm than coordination, exactly as expected. His archers pick targets methodically, aiming for officers and standard-bearers whose deaths will disrupt whatever organization the attackers possess. Greek fire teams wait until the assault troops reach the base of the outer wall before releasing streams of liquid fire that turn men into human torches. Bodies pile in the peribolos. The sight should encourage the defenders, but Constantine XI recognizes the tactical calculation behind Ottoman tactics. Every arrow shot now cannot be replaced. Each pot of Greek fire used depletes irreplaceable reserves. The Bashi bazooks accomplish their mission even in death, consuming Byzantine resources that will not be available when the real assault begins. For 2 hours, the irregulars hurl themselves against stone. Individual acts of heroism punctuate the slaughter. Ottoman volunteers scale the outer wall using their comrades' bodies as ladders. Byzantine defenders leap into the peribolos to engage in hand-to-hand combat. But the overall pattern remains unchanged. The Theodosian wall holds, as it has held for 1,000 years. At the Kerkoporta, the defenders follow the same routine that has sustained them through 7 weeks of siege. Arrow volleys target Ottoman troops who venture too close to the wall base. Stones dropped from the tower above crush skulls and break bones. Wounded men are carried to the rear, their positions filled by soldiers from the interior who have been waiting for this moment. The gate itself draws no Ottoman attention during this phase. The irregulars focus on the prepared breaches and the major gates where they believe success lies. The Kerkoporta appears too well defended and too tactically insignificant to warrant the casualties that assault would require. By 10 o'clock, Ottoman trumpets sound the recall. The first wave withdraws, leaving over 3,000 dead in the ditches and peribolos. Mehmed II's regulars begin their advance immediately, Anatolian troops in disciplined formations, their attack coordinated by drums and signal flags rather than individual enthusiasm. These soldiers fight differently than the Bashi bazooks. They probe the walls systematically, testing each defensive position, withdrawing when resistance proves too strong, advancing again when defenders shift to meet threats elsewhere. They carry scaling ladders built to specific measurements and grappling hooks designed to catch on Byzantine stonework. Their officers study the wall through spyglasses, noting weak points and defensive patterns. The Anatolian assault represents professional siege warfare. Engineers accompany the infantry, carrying tools for undermining walls and breaking gates. Artillery support coordinates with infantry advances, suppressing defensive fire at precisely calculated moments. Medical teams follow close behind assault troops, evacuating wounded and providing immediate treatment that keeps more soldiers in action. At the Kerkoporta, the fighting intensifies significantly. A group of Anatolian soldiers reaches the base of the wall and begins working systematically to pry open the gate with iron bars and siege hammers. Unlike the chaotic assault of the irregulars, this attack follows careful planning. The soldiers work in shifts, maintaining constant pressure while protecting themselves from defensive fire. The defenders above respond with everything available: dropped stones, boiling oil poured through murder holes, arrows aimed at any exposed target. For 40 minutes, the struggle continues with neither side gaining decisive advantage. Ottoman engineers study the gate mechanism, looking for structural weaknesses. Byzantine defenders call for reinforcements and additional ammunition. Then something shifts in the broader tactical situation. The sounds of fighting from other sections of the wall grow more distant as Ottoman attacks focus increasingly on the main breaches. Trumpet signals indicate another withdrawal of Anatolian forces. The systematic assault on the Kerkoporta ends as suddenly as it began, leaving the attackers dead, carrying their wounded back to Ottoman lines. Constantine XI uses this lull to redistribute his forces according to intelligence gathered during the second assault. Ottoman preparations clearly indicate that the final attack will focus on the main breaches where artillery has created the most promising opportunities. The emperor must concentrate his remaining strength at these points, even if it means weakening defenses elsewhere. The decision reflects military necessity, but it carries enormous risk. The Theodosian wall's strength lies in its systematic integration. Weakening any section invites Ottoman exploitation, but with finite forces facing an enemy that enjoys overwhelming numerical superiority, Constantine XI cannot defend everywhere with equal strength. Orders go out along the wall. Half the defenders from lightly pressured sections must redeploy to strengthen the areas where the final assault will surely come. The redistribution affects every unit, every position, every carefully established defensive routine. Men who have held the same positions for 7 weeks must abandon them to strangers and march to new assignments. At the Kerkoporta, half the defenders receive orders to march south to the breaches near the Gate of St. Romanus. These soldiers have become specialists in the peculiarities of their position. They know exactly how the gate mechanism functions, understand the specific defensive advantages their tower provides, have developed techniques for maximizing their effectiveness against Ottoman assault. They leave their positions, taking their weapons and their knowledge with them. New soldiers arrive to replace them, men who have spent the siege elsewhere on the wall, unfamiliar with the local defensive arrangements. The replacement troops are competent and experienced, but they lack the specific expertise that comes from weeks of defending this particular position. In the confusion of this redeployment, standard procedures begin to break down. The departing soldiers assume that their replacements understand the importance of gate security. The arriving soldiers assume that the departing defenders have properly secured all defensive systems before leaving. Both assumptions are reasonable, both prove fatally wrong. No formal checklist exists for the transfer of responsibility. No written procedures specify exactly what the departing guards must verify and what the arriving guards must inspect. The system has always depended on personal knowledge and professional competence rather than bureaucratic documentation. The gate's locking mechanism receives no formal inspection during the changeover. Visual examination suggests that everything is properly secured. The main bar appears to be in place, the secondary systems show no obvious signs of failure. But the complex sequence of locks, chains, and counterweights requires specific knowledge to verify complete security. The departing guards assume the arriving guards will check everything. The arriving guards assume the departing guards have already done so. No one checks the gate at all. The error will become apparent in less than 2 hours when Ottoman soldiers discover that the most famous fortress in the world has been left unlocked. At 11 o'clock, the Ottoman camp erupts in coordinated noise that carries spiritual as well as tactical significance. Drums, trumpets, and the rhythmic chanting of prayers create a wall of sound that rolls across the besieged city like an approaching storm. This is not merely military preparation, it is religious ceremony, the final invocation of divine support before the ultimate test of arms. Mehmed II rides along his lines on a white Arabian stallion, his personal standard a crimson field bearing verses from the Quran in gold calligraphy, visible to every soldier in the vast army. The Sultan wears chainmail beneath silk robes, a combination of practicality and symbolism that reflects his dual role as military commander and spiritual leader of the jihad against Byzantium. Behind him ride the great officers of the Ottoman state. Halil Pasha, the Grand Vizier who has opposed this siege from its beginning, Zarganos Pasha, the Devshirme convert who has become the Sultan's closest military advisor, Turahan Bey, whose Akinci raiders have terrorized Byzantine territories for decades. These men represent different factions within the Ottoman hierarchy, united now by the proximity of victory. The Janissaries form ranks with the precision that has made them legendary throughout Europe and Asia. Their white felt caps and blue robes remain pristine despite 7 weeks of siege warfare, a testament to military discipline that borders on the supernatural. These are not irregular volunteers or provincial troops pressed into service. They are the Sultan's household guard, recruited as children from Christian families, converted to Islam, and trained from childhood for this moment. Each janissary carries a composite bow capable of penetrating mail at 200 meters, a curved sword forged in Damascus steel, and a firearm, either a handgun or a primitive musket that represents the cutting edge of military technology. Their officers bear the ceremonial axes that mark their rank and the practical authority to execute any soldier who shows cowardice in battle. The janissary advance begins with absolute precision that seems to slow time itself. No rushing, no shouting, no display of individual heroism. They march toward the wall in columns of exactly 20 men, their officers counting cadence in voices that carry over the sound of drums. Engineers accompany each column, carrying prefabricated bridges and scaling equipment designed specifically for assault on the Theodosian wall. Behind the assault troops come reserve formations, ready to exploit whatever breakthrough the initial attack creates. Ottoman tactical doctrine emphasizes rapid exploitation of success. A small breach becomes a major penetration if reserves move quickly enough. A major penetration becomes total victory if follow-up forces can prevent defensive reorganization. Constantine XI moves along his section of wall, checking final preparations with the systematic attention to detail that has sustained the defense for 7 weeks. Greek fire teams stand ready, their bronze siphons aimed at predetermined target points. Archers have full quivers, arrows sorted by type and purpose. Stone-dropping teams have ammunition piled beside their positions, rocks and masonry arranged for maximum effect against climbing troops. The emperor carries his personal sword, a blade that has been carried by Byzantine emperors for 2 centuries. Its steel bears the nicks and stains of previous battles, including the emperor's personal combat during earlier phases of the siege. Constantine XI has chosen to fight as a soldier rather than merely command as a sovereign, and his men respect this decision enough to die for him. At the main breaches, Giovanni Giustiniani Longo positions his Genoese volunteers with the care of a master craftsman arranging his tools. These men have held the most dangerous section of the wall for 7 weeks, repelling every Ottoman probe, rebuilding the fortifications each night with rubble and timber scavenged from the ruins. They know exactly how long their arrows can delay an assault, precisely when to deploy Greek fire for maximum effect, and exactly where to position themselves for hand-to-hand combat. Giustiniani himself wears the armor of a professional condottiere, Milan plate over chainmail, with reinforced gauntlets and a helm designed for close combat. His reputation extends throughout the Mediterranean world. He has defended cities from Spain to Cyprus, turned back Ottoman attacks in the Aegean, and survived more sieges than any man alive. If Constantinople can be held, he will hold it. But Mehmed II has not forgotten the lessons of previous sieges. While his main force attacks the obvious targets, the breached walls where success seems most likely, smaller groups probe other sections of the fortification. Ottoman tactical intelligence has identified every gate, every tower, every potential weakness in the vast defensive system. Janissary officers study the wall through spyglasses crafted by the finest lensmakers in Venice, looking for signs of fatigue, gaps in coverage, opportunities that 7 weeks of bombardment and assault might have created. They note the positions of defensive artillery, the deployment patterns of archers, the condition of stonework in critical areas. These observations feed into a tactical system that treats siege warfare as applied mathematics. Ottoman engineers have calculated the exact force required to break through at each point along the wall. They know which sections can be taken by direct assault and which require preliminary bombardment. They understand the physics of stone construction and the psychology of desperate defenders. At the Kerkoporta, the new defenders settle into positions they have never occupied before. The physical layout appears straightforward: a gate in the wall, a tower above it, clear fields of fire in all directions. But effective defense of any position requires knowledge that goes beyond mere geography. The gate itself represents a masterpiece of military engineering, but one whose complexity has accumulated over time through modifications and repairs. The original 5th century construction provided basic security appropriate for its era. Subsequent improvements added layers of protection against evolving siege techniques, crossbars to resist ramming, chain systems to distribute load, counterweights to ease operation under combat conditions. The locking mechanism requires specific knowledge to operate properly. The main bar must be set before the chains are engaged, or the entire system can jam under pressure. The counterweight system must be positioned correctly, or the gate can swing open under its own mass. Small details that seem obvious to experienced operators become critical vulnerabilities when handled by newcomers. During the 7-week siege, the same team of soldiers has operated this system daily. They learned its quirks through experience, developed shortcuts and checks that ensured proper function under all conditions. When Ottoman raiders approached at night, they could secure the gate completely in under 30 seconds. When friendly patrols returned from sorties, they could open it quickly while maintaining defensive readiness. When these soldiers left for the breaches near the gate of St. Romanus, they took this knowledge with them. Their replacements possessed general competence in military engineering, but they lack the specific expertise that prevents catastrophic failure. At 11:20, a janissary probe reaches the Kerkoporta section. 50 men, moving carefully under cover of shields, testing the defenses without committing to full assault. This represents standard Ottoman reconnaissance: determine defensive strength, identify weak points, gather intelligence for the main attack. The Byzantine defenders respond exactly as trained, driving the attackers back with coordinated archery and dropped stones. The janissaries withdraw after determining that this section appears well defended and offers no obvious tactical advantages. Their mission is intelligence gathering, not breakthrough. But one janissary officer, a veteran of the siege of Belgrade who has learned to notice details that others miss, observes something during the brief engagement. As the defenders lean over the wall to target his men, he glimpses the gate mechanism through the murder holes built into the stone construction. The main bar appears to be in place, suggesting proper security. But the angle seems wrong, as if the bar has not been seated completely in its stone sockets. The chains hang looser than they should, without the tension that indicates full engagement of the locking system. Small details that might mean nothing, or might indicate catastrophic failure of the gate's security. He makes no immediate report. Ottoman military doctrine requires absolute certainty before tactical intelligence reaches senior commanders. False reports can disrupt carefully planned operations and waste resources on fruitless assaults, but the officer remembers what he has observed, filing the information for future consideration. The main assault begins at 11:30 with a precision that reflects months of planning and rehearsal. Every section of the Theodosian wall erupts in simultaneous combat as janissaries strike along the entire front. This is not the probing attack of the Anatolians or the chaotic rush of the irregulars. The janissaries advance with scaling ladders precisely measured for Byzantine walls, with grappling hooks designed to catch on specific stone patterns, with assault bridges that can span the peribolos and provide stable platforms for follow-up waves. Each element of the assault reflects technological sophistication that surpasses anything previously seen in siege warfare. Ottoman engineers have studied Byzantine construction techniques, analyzed the mathematics of wall defense, and designed equipment specifically to overcome the Theodosian fortification. The scaling ladders feature iron hooks that grip stone joints. The grappling systems use pulleys to multiply human strength. The assault bridges incorporate wheels and counterweights that allow rapid deployment under fire. At the breaches near the gate of St. Romanus, Giovanni Giustiniani Longo's Genoese fight with the desperation of men who understand exactly what defeat means. Ottoman engineers have filled the defensive ditches with fascines and earth, creating slopes that allow the janissaries to charge directly at the broken sections of wall. The assault becomes hand-to-hand combat within minutes as Ottoman troops reach the wall top and begin fighting for footholds among the stone ruins. Constantine XI joins the fighting personally, his sword cutting down janissaries who break through the defensive line. Around him, His personal guard, the last of the Byzantine nobility, die, protecting their emperor with weapons that have been carried by their families for generations. The purple banner of Byzantium still flies above the breach, but Ottoman troops have gained permanent positions on the wall itself. The emperor fights not as a symbol but as a soldier, trading sword strokes with janissary officers whose skill matches his own. His purple cloak becomes stained with blood, his own and his enemies'. The crown jewels of Byzantium remain in the Hagia Sophia, but the empire's real treasure, its thousand-year tradition of military excellence, dies with each fallen defender. At the Kerkoporta, the fighting follows a different pattern. The defending force is smaller, the Ottoman pressure less intense. But the engagement serves its tactical purpose. It keeps the defenders focused on the immediate threat, on the enemy soldiers climbing toward them, on the arrows flying overhead. No one watches the gate itself. At 11:47, the janissary officer who noticed the loose chains returns with a carefully selected team. While his comrades engage the defenders above in a demonstration designed to draw attention, he approaches the gate directly with 3 soldiers whose technical skills complement his tactical experience. The iron reinforcements added during the siege are formidable barriers against assault from outside, but they protect against external attack, not against failure of internal security systems. If the gate's locking mechanism has not been properly engaged, these reinforcements become irrelevant. The officer tests the gate carefully. A slight push against the heavy wood and iron construction produces no movement. The gate appears secure. But when he applies pressure differently, focusing force on the lower section where the main locking bar should be seated, something gives. Not much, perhaps a centimeter, but enough to confirm his suspicion. The Kerkoporta is not properly locked. The discovery represents both opportunity and enormous risk. If the gate can be forced open, Ottoman troops can penetrate the Theodosian wall without the massive casualties that direct assault requires. But if the attempt fails, if the defenders discover the effort before it succeeds, the entire element of surprise will be lost. The officer signals to his men with gestures that reveal nothing to watching defenders. 3 soldiers join him at the gate, while 2 others continue engaging the Byzantine troops above. Working together, they apply steady, coordinated pressure to the gate's lower section. The main bar holds, as it should, but the chain system has not been properly engaged during the morning's changing of the guard. Under sustained force applied at precisely the correct angle, the secondary locks begin to give way. Ottoman military engineering includes detailed study of defensive systems. These soldiers understand exactly how Byzantine gates are constructed and where their weaknesses lie. For 3 minutes, they work in absolute silence. Above them, the sounds of combat continue as planned. Byzantine defenders focus on the obvious threats, the soldiers climbing, scaling ladders, the arrows arcing toward their positions, the stones and fire dropped by Ottoman artillery teams. The gate itself draws no attention because it appears secure and because the defenders have more immediate concerns. At 11:50, the secondary locks fail entirely. The great gate begins to swing inward under pressure, applied by 4 men working with coordinated precision. The longest siege in Ottoman history becomes a rout. The janissary officer pushes the gate open just far enough to slip inside. He finds himself in a small courtyard, part of the gate's defensive complex. Stone steps lead up to the wall top where the defenders are engaged. A tunnel leads deeper into the city, toward the administrative district where Byzantine officials coordinate the defense. For 30 seconds, he evaluates the tactical situation with the calm assessment that marks professional soldiers. The defenders above have not noticed the breach. No alarm has been raised. He has perhaps 2 minutes before discovery becomes inevitable, perhaps 5 minutes before defensive reaction can organize effectively. The officer signals through the partially opened gate. His men slip inside one by one, moving with the silence that janissary training emphasizes above all other military virtues. Then he sends 1 soldier back through the gap with a message for the nearest Ottoman commander. The Kerkoporta has been taken from the inside. At 11:52, 50 Ottoman soldiers are inside the Theodosian wall, moving toward objectives that will determine the fate of the last Roman Empire. The Byzantine Empire, heir to Augustus and Constantine the Great, has less than 20 minutes left to live. The first defender to notice the breach is a Genoese crossbowman positioned in the tower above the Kerkoporta. Mathios Cantacuzénos, a veteran of sieges in Cyprus and Crete, has developed the habit of checking the gate's security every few minutes during combat. At 11:53, he looks down through a murder hole to verify that the gate remains properly sealed, a routine glance that has become instinctive during 7 weeks of siege, and sees Ottoman soldiers moving through the courtyard below his position. For several seconds, his mind cannot process what his eyes observe. The gate appears closed from his angle above. The sounds of fighting continue normally from other positions. But Janissaries are inside the perimeter, moving with purpose toward the stairs that lead to his position. The impossibility of the situation creates a moment of paralysis. Gates do not open themselves. Walls do not admit enemies without being breached. Yet the evidence before him contradicts these fundamental assumptions about siege warfare. Cantacuzénos shouts a warning, but his voice carries poorly over the noise of combat. Greek words mixing with Genoese dialect, creating confusion among defenders who speak different languages. The other defenders are focused on targets outside the wall, on the Ottoman soldiers visible in the conventional assault positions. By the time his alarm registers with soldiers who can respond effectively, Ottoman troops have reached the base of the tower. The fight for the tower lasts exactly 4 minutes, but these 4 minutes encompass the collapse of a defensive system that has protected Constantinople for over a millennium. 12 Byzantine defenders against 50 Janissaries in a stone structure designed to protect against attack from outside, not from within. The Ottomans control the only exit from the tower. They advance up the spiral stairs methodically, using their superior numbers to overwhelm each defensive position. The stairs themselves become a killing ground, but one that favors the attackers. Each step provides cover for the soldiers below, while exposing the defenders above. Cantacuzénos dies on the stairs, his crossbow empty, fighting with a Byzantine shortsword that has been in his family for 3 generations. Around him, Genoese volunteers and Byzantine regulars fall back step by step, selling their lives for seconds of delay that might allow warning to reach other positions. At 11:57, the tower falls. Ottoman soldiers appear on the wall top, cutting down the remaining defenders from behind. The tactical situation that has sustained Byzantine resistance for 7 weeks reverses in minutes. Instead of fighting from prepared positions against attackers climbing toward them, the defenders find themselves caught between enemies on multiple sides. The Janissary officer who discovered the unlocked gate plants his unit's standard on the tower roof, a white flag with the Sultan's personal cipher embroidered in gold thread. The flag measures 2 meters by 3 meters, large enough to be visible from considerable distance, bright enough to stand out against the grey stone of the fortification. Other Ottoman units notice the flag immediately. This is the signal they have trained to recognize throughout the siege, a breach in the Theodosian wall. Not a temporary foothold that might be retaken, but a permanent penetration that opens the entire defensive system to collapse. Reserve formations begin moving toward the Kerkoporta, while the main assault continues against the prepared breaches. Ottoman tactical doctrine emphasizes rapid exploitation of unexpected opportunities. A small breach becomes a major penetration if reserves move quickly enough. A major penetration becomes total victory if follow-up forces prevent defensive reorganization. But the psychological impact spreads faster than any tactical response. Byzantine soldiers defending other sections of the wall see Ottoman flags flying from their own fortifications. The sight contradicts everything they understand about the siege's progress. The walls were holding against massive assault. The breaches were contained through desperate fighting. The Ottomans were taking enormous casualties for minimal gain. Now enemy flags fly from an unbroken section of the Theodosian wall. The news travels along the wall top with the speed that only catastrophic information achieves. Runners carry reports from position to position. Soldiers abandon their posts to verify the impossible. Officers demand explanations that no one can provide. The disciplined defensive system that has sustained Byzantine resistance begins to unravel as men try to understand how the impossible has become real. Word reaches Constantine XI at 1159. A runner, bleeding from multiple wounds sustained during the fighting retreat from the Kerkoporta, reaches the emperor's position near the gate of St. Romanus. The message he carries makes no tactical sense according to any theory of siege warfare. Ottomans have taken the Kerkoporta without breaking the wall. The emperor demands immediate clarification. How many Ottoman troops? What weapons do they carry? Have they penetrated into the city, or merely taken the gate itself? The runner can only repeat what he has seen. Ottoman flags flying from the tower, enemy soldiers moving freely along the wall top, Byzantine defenders falling back in confusion toward the city center. Constantine XI faces a decision that no amount of military training can prepare him for. The main Ottoman assault continues with undiminished intensity against the breaches where he stands. Giovanni Giustiniani Longo's Genoese are barely holding their positions against waves of Janissary attacks. If the emperor withdraws forces to deal with the Kerkoporta breach, the main defensive line will collapse immediately under Ottoman pressure. But if Ottoman troops are already inside the wall, the entire defensive strategy has become meaningless. The Theodosian wall's strength lies in its integrity as a complete system. Once breached at any point, its ability to protect the city depends entirely on the speed with which that breach can be sealed. The mathematics of the situation allow no correct solution. The emperor commands perhaps 3,000 effective troops along the entire wall. To seal the Kerkoporta breach requires at least 500 men, a quarter of his total force. To withdraw that many soldiers from other positions invites immediate collapse everywhere else. At 12 noon exactly, Constantine XI makes his choice. He will hold the main breaches with his remaining forces while sending a small reserve to retake the Kerkoporta. It is a compromise that satisfies neither tactical requirement, too few men to seal the northern breach, too few left to hold the southern ones. The emperor selects 200 men from his personal guard, soldiers whose loyalty extends beyond mere military duty. These men understand that they march toward probable death in service of an empire that may not survive the day. They accept this fate because Constantine XI has chosen to share it, because their emperor will die as a soldier rather than flee as a symbol. But before these orders can be implemented, the tactical situation deteriorates beyond any possibility of control. At 12:01, Mehmed II's tactical reserves reach the Kerkoporta. 300 fresh Janissaries pour through the opened gate, followed by Sipahi cavalry who can now bypass the wall entirely. The small courtyard that contains the gate becomes packed with Ottoman troops seeking entry to the city, a traffic jam of victory that nonetheless represents unstoppable momentum. These reinforcements represent the finest military units in the Ottoman Empire. Unlike the garrison troops who took the initial breach, these soldiers carry equipment specifically designed for urban warfare. They understand street fighting, house-to-house combat, the systematic reduction of fortified positions within cities. At 12:03, these reinforcements begin their advance along the wall top toward other defensive positions. Byzantine defenders, already engaged frontally against the main Ottoman assault, suddenly find themselves attacked from behind by enemies who have appeared where no enemies should be able to exist. The psychological impact proves more devastating than the tactical threat. Men who have fought with desperate courage for 7 weeks find their fundamental assumptions about siege warfare shattered. If the Ottomans can appear behind them without warning, if the walls can be breached without bombardment, if the impossible has already occurred, then anything might happen next. The retreat becomes a rout as news of the breach spreads faster than the fleeing soldiers. Individual courage cannot overcome systemic collapse. Units that have held their positions against overwhelming odds for weeks abandon them after minutes of fighting on 2 fronts. At 12:05, Ottoman troops reach the gate of St. Romanus from inside the wall. They attack the breach defenders from behind while the main Ottoman assault continues from the front. Giovanni Giustiniani Longo, fighting desperately to hold the prepared breaches, suddenly faces Janissary attacks from a direction he did not expect. The Genoese commander falls, struck by an arrow fired from the wall top behind his position. His personal standard, a red cross on white field that has flown over dozens of successful defences, topples into the rubble of the breach. His volunteers, seeing their commander down and enemy soldiers in their rear, break and run toward the city centre. The professional discipline that has sustained the defence for 7 weeks evaporates in minutes. Without Giustiniani's leadership, without any coherent plan for dealing with attacks from multiple directions, without any hope that the situation can be salvaged, the remaining defenders abandon their positions and flee. Constantine XI finds himself surrounded by Ottoman troops in the ruins of his own defences. The purple banner of Byzantium still flies above his position, but he commands perhaps 30 men against thousands of enemies. The mathematics of the siege, unfavourable from the beginning, have become impossible. The emperor looks toward the Hagia Sophia, visible across the city, where the treasures of Byzantium await either preservation or plunder. He could surrender. He could flee to the harbour and attempt escape by ship. He could seek sanctuary in the great cathedral and trust to Ottoman mercy. Instead, at 1207, Constantine XI discards the purple regalia that marks his imperial status. If he must die, he will die as a soldier, not as a symbol. He draws his sword, the blade carried by Byzantine emperors for 2 centuries, and charges into the Ottoman ranks, seeking an honourable death in personal combat. The last Roman emperor disappears into the melee, his fate lost among thousands of individual tragedies. His body will never be positively identified. The purple phoenix, symbol of Byzantine renewal, dies with him in the rubble of the Theodosian wall. At 1215, Ottoman flags fly from every tower of the great fortification. The siege of Constantinople, begun on April 6th and sustained for 54 days at enormous cost in blood and treasure, ends 15 minutes after a single gate swings open. Mehmed II enters the city at 1 o'clock, riding through the Kerkoporta itself to inspect the breach that has delivered him an empire. The gate that defeated the Theodosian wall measures 3 meters wide and 4 meters high. Through this opening, no larger than the entrance to a modest house, flows the army that will transform the eastern Mediterranean and threaten the heart of Europe. The conquest of Constantinople is complete. The Byzantine Empire is extinct. The last Roman city has fallen to the Ottoman Empire, all because someone forgot to turn a key. The sack of Constantinople begins immediately and continues for 3 days, as Islamic law permits following a city's refusal to surrender. Ottoman soldiers pour through the opened gates and the breaches in the wall, encountering minimal resistance from a population that has spent 7 weeks preparing for this moment. The systematic violence that follows represents not random brutality, but calculated policy designed to discourage future resistance throughout the expanding Ottoman Empire. By sunset on May 29th, Ottoman patrols control every major intersection in the city. Resistance collapses as news of Constantine XI's death spreads through the civilian population. Without imperial leadership, without any coordinated defense, without hope of relief, the citizens of Constantinople surrender to their fate with the resignation of people who have always known this day would come. The Hagia Sophia, center of Eastern Orthodox Christianity for 900 years, becomes a mosque within hours of the city's fall. Mehmed II orders the building's preservation, but commands the immediate removal of all Christian imagery. Mosaics depicting Christ, the Virgin Mary, and Christian saints disappear under coats of plaster. The great dome that has dominated Constantinople's skyline since the 6th century echoes with Islamic prayers for the first time in its 1,000-year history. The transformation represents more than religious conquest. For 9 centuries, the Hagia Sophia has served as the symbolic heart of Eastern Christianity, the cathedral where emperors were crowned, and the Orthodox faith proclaimed its supremacy over both Catholic Rome and Islamic rivals. Its conversion to Islamic worship marks the definitive end of Byzantine civilization and the extension of Ottoman power into European territory. In the Ottoman camp, commanders conduct their initial analysis of the siege's unexpected conclusion. 7 weeks of systematic bombardment, 3 coordinated assaults, and estimated casualties of 30,000 men, all rendered meaningless by an unlocked gate. The irony does not escape Sultan Mehmed II's attention. In his personal journal, discovered centuries later in the Topkapi Palace archives, the Sultan records, "Cities fall to preparation, not to fortune. But even the most thorough preparation cannot account for human error." The observation reflects both tactical wisdom and strategic insight. Ottoman siegecraft has evolved through systematic study of fortification design, defensive psychology, and military engineering. But no amount of planning can predict or prevent the kind of catastrophic failure that delivered Constantinople. The lesson shapes Ottoman military doctrine for the remainder of the empire's expansion. Expect the unexpected, prepare for multiple contingencies, and maintain tactical flexibility regardless of original planning. The Janissary officer who discovered the breach receives immediate promotion to battalion command and a personal audience with the Sultan. His written report, preserved in Ottoman military archives, becomes part of standard siege warfare instruction. Commanders must account for minor gates and sallyports with the same attention paid to major fortifications. The principle influences Ottoman siegecraft for the remainder of the empire's military supremacy. His report identifies the specific factors that enabled the breach: inadequate security protocols, lack of redundant checking systems, and reliance on informal procedures rather than written standards. These observations lead to comprehensive reforms in Ottoman siege technique, emphasizing systematic intelligence gathering about all aspects of enemy fortifications rather than focus solely on obvious targets. In the immediate aftermath, blame for the disaster falls on the unknown guard whose duty encompassed the gate's security. But investigation reveals a more complex failure involving multiple levels of military organization. The redeployment of experienced defenders to strengthen other positions, the arrival of replacement troops unfamiliar with local procedures, the lack of written protocols for gate security, and the absence of redundant checking systems all contributed to the catastrophe. The analysis becomes a case study in military organization and the importance of systematic procedures in maintaining security. No single individual caused the fall of Constantinople, but the accumulation of small oversights created conditions where catastrophic failure became possible. The lesson applies beyond military affairs to any complex system where security depends on human performance under stress. The Byzantine Empire, which traced its institutional lineage directly to the Roman Empire of Augustus Caesar, ends with the death of Constantine XI Palaiologos. His designated successors flee to Western Europe, carrying titles without territories, claims without power. The Purple Phoenix, symbol of Byzantine renewal that has survived barbarian invasions, Arab conquests, and Crusader betrayals, disappears from European heraldry. The emperor's death becomes the subject of competing accounts. Ottoman sources claim he died fighting as a common soldier, his identity unknown until after the battle. Genoese survivors report that he discarded his imperial regalia and sought death in combat rather than capture. Later Byzantine chroniclers, writing in exile, transform his death into martyrdom for the Orthodox faith. All sources agree on the essential fact: Constantine XI Shakan chose to die with his empire rather than survive its extinction. This decision, consistent with his conduct throughout the siege, establishes him as the model of imperial honor under impossible circumstances. He becomes, in death, what he could never be in life, a perfect symbol of Byzantine courage. For the defenders who survive the siege, the disaster at the Kerkoporta becomes a permanent lesson in the fragility of complex defensive systems. A fortress is only as strong as its weakest component, and that component may not be the obvious target of enemy attention. Giovanni Giustiniani Longo's Genoese volunteers fight magnificently at the main breaches but survive only because they withdraw when the northern gate falls. Their accounts, recorded years later in Genoa, emphasize the psychological impact of rear attack during siege defense. Soldiers trained to fight from prepared positions against frontal assault cannot easily adapt to combat on multiple axes. The tactical flexibility required for such situations demands training that few military organizations provide during peacetime. European reaction to Constantinople's fall focuses initially on the city's strategic importance. Control of the Bosphorus gives the Ottoman Empire effective dominion over trade between Europe and Asia, disrupting commercial relationships that have existed since antiquity. Venetian and Genoese merchants must now negotiate with Ottoman officials for access to markets that were previously open. But deeper analysis recognizes the tactical implications of the siege's outcome. No fortification, however ancient or proven, can withstand the combination of systematic siegecraft and human error. The fall of Constantinople encourages Ottoman expansion into Hungary, Austria, and Poland while discouraging European resistance to Islamic advance. The psychological impact exceeds the strategic consequences. If Constantinople could fall, if the Theodosian Wall could be breached, if the last Roman city could be conquered, then no Christian stronghold could consider itself secure. The Ottoman Empire, previously viewed as a regional power, emerges as an existential threat to European civilization. The Kerkoporta itself survives the siege and the subsequent reconstruction of the city as Istanbul. Ottoman engineers study its design with professional interest, noting both the defensive advantages that made it nearly impregnable and the mechanical complexities that led to its failure. The gate receives new locks, new protocols, and new guards trained specifically in its operation. The original stone construction remains unchanged, but the locking mechanism undergoes complete redesign. Ottoman engineers eliminate the complex chain systems that proved vulnerable to improper operation, replacing them with simpler bars and counterweights that cannot fail through operator error. The gate that ended the Byzantine Empire becomes a model of Ottoman military engineering. Mehmed II orders the construction of Topkapi Palace on the site where the Theodosian Wall meets the Sea of Marmara. From his private chambers, the Sultan can see the gate through which his empire entered Europe. The view serves as a daily reminder that victory depends not only on strength and preparation, but on the enemy's capacity for mistake. The palace design incorporates lessons learned during the siege. Multiple defensive lines, redundant security systems, and formal protocols for all administrative functions reflect Ottoman determination to avoid the kind of failure that delivered Constantinople. The irony is deliberate. The conqueror's palace embodies the defensive principles that the conquered city failed to maintain. The siege's duration, 54 days, becomes a benchmark for Ottoman military planning. Future campaigns assume that any properly defended city can hold for approximately 8 weeks, provided its garrison maintains discipline and its fortifications remain intact. The planning assumption proves accurate for the remainder of the 16th century, as Ottoman forces sweep through Hungary, Austria, and Poland. But the speed of Constantinople's collapse after the Kerkoporta breach 15 minutes from opened gate to fallen city demonstrates the catastrophic potential of defensive failure. Ottoman doctrine emphasizes multiple simultaneous attacks precisely to create opportunities for such failures, reasoning that defenders cannot maintain perfect vigilance at all points indefinitely. Military engineering throughout Europe undergoes systematic revision following Constantinople's fall. New fortifications incorporate multiple redundant security systems for all gates, formal protocols for changing guards, and written procedures that eliminate dependence on individual knowledge. The star fort designs that dominate European warfare for the next 2 centuries reflect lessons learned from Byzantine failure. The technological revolution that produces these new fortifications also drives changes in Ottoman siege craft. Artillery development accelerates as engineers seek weapons capable of breaching the improved European designs. The military balance between offense and defense shifts continuously as each side adapts to innovations by their opponents. In later centuries, military historians debate whether the siege's outcome was inevitable. Some argue that Constantinople was doomed regardless of the gate's security, overwhelmed by Ottoman numerical superiority and technological advantages. Others contend that the city could have withstood assault indefinitely, forcing Mehmed II to accept a negotiated settlement that preserved Byzantine independence. The debate misses the essential point revealed by detailed examination of the siege's conclusion. The outcome resulted not from Ottoman strength or Byzantine weakness, but from the fundamental unpredictability that characterizes all warfare. Human error, Mechanical failure and simple chance can overcome any amount of planning, preparation, or courage. The Theodosian Wall, which protected Constantinople for over 1,000 years against Huns, Arabs, Bulgars, and Russians, falls to a door left ajar by a guard whose name history does not record. The lesson written in the rubble of the last Roman city applies to every fortress, every army, and every defensive plan. Ultimate security remains an illusion, vulnerable to the smallest oversight. Mehmed II conquers Belgrade, Budapest, and Rhodes using conventional siege techniques perfected during the Constantinople campaign. His armies advanced to the gates of Vienna, establishing Ottoman control over most of southeastern Europe. But he never forgets that his greatest victory came through a gate opened by accident rather than design. The Sultan's memoirs, discovered in Ottoman archives during the 19th century, record his reflection on the siege's outcome. Fortune favors the prepared, but preparation cannot account for every human failing. We succeeded not because we were stronger, but because our enemies were mortal. The observation captures both the military reality of siege warfare and the broader lesson that applies to all human endeavors. Complex systems fail in complex ways, often through combinations of factors that no individual could predict or prevent. The fall of Constantinople represents not just the end of an empire, but a demonstration of the fragility that underlies all human institutions. The Byzantine Empire ends with a door left unlocked. The Ottoman Empire begins with a door pushed open. Between these two simple actions lies the transformation of the medieval world into the modern era, accomplished not through the grand sweep of historical forces, but through the accumulated weight of human mistakes.